Picture this. One man stands at a well in the middle of a city. He reaches down, pulls up a wooden bucket full of water, and walks away. He sneaks into that same city at night, grabs that same bucket, and runs back home with it. Also pretty normal for 1325 Italy. Now picture 32,000 soldiers marching to war because of that bucket. The Pope calling someone a heretic because of that bucket. And the bucket still sitting in the same city it was stolen to 700 years later in a glass case on display. That is what we are talking about today. Let me describe what that bucket looks like today. It is a simple wooden bucket. Oak, no jewels, no special markings. It looks exactly like what it is. A bucket someone used to pull water from a well in 1325. Completely unremarkable, completely ordinary. And it has its own display case in a government building in Modena, Italy, because it once caused one of the largest battles of the entire medieval period. A real war. A documented, historically verified war. Fought in northern Italy in 1325. Started, at least symbolically, because someone stole a wooden bucket from a public well. And before you think this is some tiny local skirmish with like 40 guys and a misunderstanding, no. This was one of the largest battles in medieval European history. The Battle of Hastings, which decided who ruled England. 32,000 men for a bucket. Let's get into it. To understand why a bucket could start a war, you need to understand what northern Italy looked like in 1325. And the answer is a complete disaster. Italy was not a country. Instead, the entire peninsula was carved up into dozens of independent city-states. Each city was its own tiny nation. Each city had its own army, its own laws, its own money, and its own list of cities it absolutely despised. Picture a map of northern Italy. Now draw little fists raised at every neighboring city. Now draw those fists actually punching each other every few months. That is medieval northern Italy. Bologna was one of these cities. Rich, powerful, proud. Bologna sat in the middle of the region, fat and comfortable, backed by the Pope. The Guelphs, the pro-Pope faction, counted Bologna as one of their most important cities. Right next door sat Modena. And when I say right next door, I mean you can drive between them in about 30 minutes today. In 1325, they were basically neighbors who shared a fence and had been throwing rocks over it for 200 years. These two teams, Guelphs backing the Pope, Ghibellines backing the Holy Roman Emperor, had been at war across Italy for over 2 centuries by 1325. Not Cold War, not economic rivalry, actual raiding. Actual burning, actual kidnapping of noblemen for ransom. This was normalized. This was Tuesday. Here's how constant this raiding was. Stolen cattle, burned water mills, captured noblemen, destroyed crops. One incident involved Bolognese forces invading Modenese territory and seizing an entire castle. Modena responded by capturing a different castle back. Then Bologna raided again. Then Modena counter-raided. Bologna had raided Modena's farms just months before our story begins. Bolognese soldiers rode out, burned fields, stole livestock, and on their way home, apparently just for fun, fired crossbows at Modena's city walls. Not to breach them, not as a military tactic, just to be annoying. The powder keg is full, the fuse is lit, all it needed was a bucket. One night in 1325, a group of Modenese soldiers conducted a raid on Bologna. Nothing special. Raids happen constantly. The whole operation was sneak in, grab stuff, cause chaos, run home before the guards mobilize. A few soldiers grab food, a few grab valuables. One of them spots a wooden bucket sitting at a public well in the center of the city. He grabs it. We do not know why. History does not record the thought process of this specific soldier. Maybe after a long night of raiding, he just thought, hey, bucket. Whatever the reason, he grabbed it, tucked it under his arm alongside the rest of the loot. And the whole group ran back to Modena. You have grabbed food, grabbed valuables, done what you came to do. Your group is about to leave. You are standing next to a well. There is a bucket on the well. Maybe it was genuinely a joke. Like, hey guys, watch this. I am going to steal their bucket. Maybe the whole group laughed about it on the way home. Maybe it seemed like the funniest thing in the world at 2 a.m. after a successful raid, returning to Modena carrying a bucket. Look at what we took, lads. Their bucket. And another agreed. And before anyone stopped to think about consequences, the bucket was in the bell tower. Bologna knew about it, and the wheels were in motion. Now here is where a normal story would end. Soldier comes home with bucket. Bucket goes in a corner somewhere. The Modenese soldiers came home, emptied out their loot, and decided the bucket was the highlight of the evening. They showed it around the city. They celebrated it. They treated this completely ordinary wooden water bucket like a war trophy, like it was a captured battle standard. And then they mounted it in the bell tower of the Modena Cathedral, right at the top, where everyone could see it. Bologna found out, and Bologna lost its mind. Because here is the thing. In medieval Italian city-state politics, this was not just theft. Modena had walked into Bologna, stolen from them, and was now displaying the evidence at the top of their most prominent tower. This was public humiliation, and in this world, humiliation had to be answered. Bologna sent a formal demand. 2 words, basically, return it. Modena sent back 1 word, no. Not no, we lost it. We are keeping the bucket. It is in our tower. It is ours now. Come take it if you want it. Bologna stared at that response, looked at the bucket sitting in Modena's bell tower, made a decision. They did not dispatch a squad of soldiers to retrieve the bucket quietly. They called in every favor they had. Guelph allies arrived from across northern Italy. Florence sent soldiers marching in from the west, banners flying. A professional mercenary commander, Malatesta, Lord of Rimini, took overall command of the combined forces and began organizing the largest army assembled in the region in years. And then the Pope got involved. Pope John the 22nd sat in Avignon, France, heard about the situation, and decided this was a matter requiring his personal attention. He declared Modena's leader, a man named Passerino Bonacolsi, a heretic and a rebel against the church, the kind normally reserved for crusades, for going to fight over a bucket. This is the moment where I need you to fully appreciate the scale of what is happening. We started with a bucket stolen from a well. We are now at the head of the Catholic Church, the most powerful religious figure in the Western world, is personally issuing declarations about this bucket. Crusaders went to reclaim Jerusalem. These soldiers were going to reclaim a bucket. Same spiritual rewards. By the time Bologna finished assembling, 32,000 soldiers stood ready to march. 32,000. Modena watched this happening. Modena assembled their own army, 7,000 men, 7,000 against 32,000, a ratio of more than 4 to 1. On paper, this was not a fight. This was an execution. And here is what Modena had: professionals. Bologna's army was mostly untrained citizen militia, volunteers, people who farmed or traded or made shoes, handed a weapon and pointed at the enemy, enthusiastic, numerous, completely inexperienced. Modena's 7,000 were almost entirely professional soldiers, German mercenary cavalry, the military elite of the era. And their commander, Bonacolsi, was one of the sharpest charts military minds in northern Italy. Before the main battle even started, Bonacolsi ran a deception. He ordered a portion of his forces to march visibly and loudly toward a river crossing on the left flank, making noise, making a show, acting like the main attack was coming from that direction. Bologna's commanders saw thousands of Modenese soldiers heading for the river. Their formations split. By the time they realized there was no real river crossing, that it was a feint to pull them out of position, it was too late to reorganize. The two armies met on November 15th, 1325, near a small village called Zappolino, in the rolling hills between the two cities. The sun was already low. The battle lasted 2 hours. 2 hours sounds fast. Consider what 2 hours means for 32,000 people. Now, that is not a battle where one side slowly loses ground and eventually retreats. That is a collapse. 2,000 people died in those 2 hours. And then the survivors ran, a flood of soldiers streaming back across the countryside toward Bologna, a trail of abandoned equipment marking their path. Modenese soldiers reportedly found swords, shields, helmets, boots, just left on the ground by men who decided the equipment was slowing them down. Modena's cavalry drove hard into the weakest point of the Bolognese line. Flanking columns curved around both sides simultaneously. 32,000 men collapsed in 2 hours. The Bolognese did not retreat. They ran. Individual soldiers sprinting back toward their own city as fast as their legs would carry them, throwing down weapons and shields and helmets as they went, leaving a trail of abandoned equipment stretching across the hillside. Modena chased them, all the way to the gates of Bologna itself. Their enemy was inside. The gates were shut. Bolognese citizens crowded the battlements, looking down at the army that had just destroyed their 32,000 soldiers in 2 hours. Modena had a choice. Siege the city and try to finish the job. Right outside the city's walls, in full view of every Bolognese citizen watching from above. Modena's soldiers set up a celebration. Tables appeared. Banners went up. Music started. They organized a palio, a public athletic competition, right there on the field outside the gates of the city they had just defeated. The historical record describes this as being held explicitly for the eternal shame of Bologna. They wanted history to know this party was specifically designed to humiliate their enemy, while their enemy watched helplessly from the walls above. The exact Latin phrase used in the historical record translates to the eternal memory of those sent out on the expedition and the eternal shame of Bologna. 2 clauses. First, remember us, the Modenese who did this. Second, remember Bologna who lost. They wanted this documented. They want future historians to know that this party happened and why. Here we are, 700 years later, talking about it. Bologna stood on their battlements and watched their conquerors dance outside their gates. Let us talk about the psychology of this for a second, because this party was not spontaneous. Someone decided to do this. Or we could do something better. They chose something better. The palio they organized was a real public event. Athletic competitions, races, games, all happening 30 meters from Bologna's city gate, while Bolognese citizens and soldiers watched from above. They were making a spectacle of Bologna's humiliation for an audience of the humiliated. And then the second bucket. Whoever grabbed that second bucket understood exactly what they were doing. 1 bucket was the theft. 2 buckets was the punchline. I genuinely believe this was intentional. I think someone saw that well near the gate, looked at the bucket, thought about the bucket in the tower back home, and made a choice. 2 is funnier than 1. So they grabbed it. And then, before leaving, one of the Modenese soldiers walked over to a well just outside the city gate, spotted the bucket sitting there, picked it up. They went home with 2 buckets, a victory, and a party to remember. In January 1326, a peace treaty was signed. Bologna paid to get their captured castles and territories back. 26 prominent Bolognese citizens who had spent 11 weeks locked in a Modenese prison were released. The territories went back to roughly where they had been before. 2,000 people were dead. The Pope had declared someone a heretic. Half of northern Italy had mobilized. And the bucket? The bucket was not part of the negotiations. It stayed in Modena. It is still there. The original oak bucket, stolen from a public well in Bologna in 1325, sits in the city of Modena today. 700 years later, they moved it to City Hall for safekeeping. A replica hangs in the bell tower of the cathedral, where it has been displayed since the day the soldiers brought it home.